to Inner Peace Better Health, where we explore the soul behind the science of well being. I am your host, Shreya. Today, we are joined by Christian de la Huerta, a TEDx speaker, spiritual teacher, and award winning author whose wisdom spans over 3 decades. With his latest book, Conscious Love, Christian invites us to rethink how we show up in relationships, shifting from unconscious patterns to soulful, healing connections. So, welcome, Christian. I'm honored to have you on my show.
Hi, Shreya. So glad to be here with you. Thanks for having me.
And, Christian, your work centers on transforming our approach to relationships. How does conscious love truly mean in a world full of conditional patterns?
Yeah, that's a great question. Because part of the problem is that we're not even conscious about the way we approach relationships. So a lot of the reasons we get ourselves into trouble with relationships, part of the reason they don't tend to work out, is that we're approaching them not even knowing why. So, for example, if we're approaching a relationship because we feel that that relationship, that person is gonna make us happy, is gonna fulfill us, forget it. That there isn't anybody out there who's gonna make us happy, and it's not their job to. So how unfair to approach that person or that relationship with that expectation. It's a big responsibility. You are gonna make me happy. So that's one of the reasons, relationships aren't meant to complete us. They're meant to help us figure out who we are, to help us walk this journey of life with a companion, but they're definitely not meant to give us that sense of completion or fulfillment of happiness.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. And thank you for sharing this answer. And also, how can someone recognize if they are loving from ego or soul?
Oh, that's a huge question because we have to figure out we have to first realize and understand what the ego is. And we don't have a whole lot of time to get into that. It's a huge conversation.
Yeah.
Here's a simple metaphor. If you put a football in the center of a stadium, that's what the ego is. And who we are is actually the stadium. So
Yeah.
we've confused our identification. We've allowed this tiny part of who we are to think that it is all of who we are, and to make really important choices about what we do with our lives, what kind of relationships we get involved in, from its very small, limited, and always fear-based perspective. So the word ego means I, right? It's that sense of I-ness, the sense of separate individual identity. Like this is Christian over here, that's Shreya over there. It's both a very helpful illusion. And what I mean by that is that as far as we know, we're the only species that has a sense of self, that sense of separate individual personality. Um, so it's helpful. It's one of the reasons we're so successful as a species, and it's also the source of all our pain, all our suffering. Once we have that sense of separation, of being alone in the universe, that's why we have abandonment issues, why we have a sense of mortality, why we have so much relationship stuff. It stems from that. So in my previous book, this last book is on relationships, but it's about transforming a relationship to relationships. The previous book is called Awakening the Soul of Power. It's about a relationship to power. And in that book, I spent probably the first quarter of the book, the first third, the first fifth of the book, getting into what the ego is and why it's different so I talk about ego power, the way that we have a relationship to power in the world, the way that we relate to power. And then there's this other way, which is more about coming from that other stadium part of ourselves rather than that small individual separate identity part of self. So for example, the way we relate to power is if it's high, the ego power is hierarchical. It's about power over. It's about you doing things my way because that's the way it is. It's my way or the highway. Um, whereas And it's so related to proving worth. I derive a sense of power by pushing somebody down, by stepping on them, by putting my knee to their neck. And so we prop ourselves up that way, and we think that that makes us powerful. Whereas the other kind of power, the other soulful power, is humble. It doesn't need to prove anything to anybody. Think of a Gandhi or Gandalf, if you like the Lord of the Rings, in their simple monastic robe, their sandal feet. From looking at them from the outside, you would never know how much power they hold until it's necessary, until it's called for, and then get out of the way. Gandhi brought the British Empire to its knees when it was at its highest point in terms of global influence without ever shooting a gun or landing a single punch. Talk about power. That's power.
Yeah, yeah, and that self check is so real that many of us think that we are loving, but often we are just managing our wounds. And
Exa-
also, yes, and you have said that relationships are mirrors. What are some of the most common unconscious reflections that people overlook in their partnerships?
Yeah, that's a great observation too. Like if we want to do relationships consciously, meaning that we know that there isn't anybody out there who's going to make us happy and that only we are responsible for that. Only we are going to make ourselves happy. Then there's a couple of levels that we can do relationships. Level one, it's like maybe the other person doesn't want to play, doesn't that interested, but enough works. Enough about the relationship works. Maybe you live well together, you cohabit well together, you co-parent well together, you travel well together. Sex and intimate relationships might be great. So we might say, okay, well, there's enough of it about this that works. I'm gonna stay, and I'm gonna reclaim all the energy, the resources, the time that I would otherwise be spending for the one, in quotes. Um, and I'm gonna devote that to focus that on my personal growth, my personal transformation, my spiritual transformation, which I think is ultimately why we're here. Level three, we'll skip number two and come back to it. Level three, both beings already fully realized, already fully conscious and aware of our God essence. And then the relationship becomes a dance, a sacred dance of mirroring that for each other. I don't think we need to worry about that one yet. So we'll go back to number two. Number two is relationship, where we use the relationship as a mirror, as a way to 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 heal, to find, because we all have blind spots, so that we're never going to see in any mirror that we look at. But if we approach the relationship consciously, meaning that we mirror that stuff for each other, that if it's there in the other person, it's also here. And the more that whatever they do gets us, the clearer it is that we also do that. And it might be completely different, like the details might be different, but the act is the same, right? The behavior is the same. It's in there in some way. So, for example, some years ago, I was dating somebody, and they suddenly stopped showing up. They didn't return emails, phone calls, no communication. Um, and I was like, huh, what's going on? I didn't get it. I was focused on over there, so I didn't get it. At around the same time, I was trying to schedule an appointment with a literary agent that I was working with in New York. And she was great about communication. Like, she came back to me within 24, at most 20, 48 hours. A week went by and I hadn't heard from her. Now that got my attention. Two people, different walks of life, completely unrelated, doing the same kind of thing, right? So first, let's get clear. What were they doing? Because so that it's harder to see the blind spots. So let's focus on what were they doing? They weren't showing up. They weren't doing what they said they would do. They weren't keeping their word. They weren't keeping their agreements, right? Easy to see over there, right? Like, turn that mirror around. How am I doing? And it took me a couple of days to figure that out, because I was looking at other relationships, and no, I was showing up. Yep, I'm keeping my word. I'm doing what I said I would do, until it hit me in relationship to my writing. Like, how many times had I said to myself, nobody else was involved in this, I'm going to finish that chapter by such and such a date. That date came and went, and I was doing other stuff. I was doing retreats, I was doing workshops, all good stuff, but I wasn't showing up for my writing. I wasn't keeping my word with myself in relationship to that one area of my life. But it doesn't matter, right? It's like doing the same thing. The details are different. But here's how when we do things consciously, how beautifully they work. Within an hour of me having that insight, they both called. Like no longer did I need to create external drama in my life so that I would get to see like, wait a minute, dude, show up for your writing or not. Like you don't have to do it. There's nobody telling you have to finish that book. So either do it or not do it, but make a conscious choice or at least renegotiate the deadlines so that you're doing what you said you would do. Right.
Yes. And I think that discomfort is often the doorway to intimacy if we dare to walk through it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's
And
so worth it. Yeah, the discomfort. Yeah, this stuff is hard to look at ourselves in this way, to ask the hard questions of why we do the things we do. Why do we get stuck in these patterns? Why do we get stuck in these relationships that sometimes feel like it's the same boring movie, only with a different actor, with a different co-lead, but the same kind of argument, the same kind of patterns. At some point, we have to get honest with ourselves and we have to face ourselves and ask the hard questions. Who's the common denominator in every one of these arguments, in every one of these relationships? And it's right here. It's hard, but it's so worth it because once we face ourselves and we ask those hard questions, we get to make free conscious choices about why we do the things we do.
definitely. And also, your book talks about power and love coexisting. Why do so many people struggle to embody that personal power without overpowering the other?
Yeah, that's another great question. And we've been conditioned to believe that power is a bad thing. Now, with quotes like "power corrupts," and the whole quote says, "Absolute power corrupts absolutely." And who wants to be corrupted? What good person wants to be corrupted? I don't. But what they didn't tell us about that quote is that Lord Acton, who spoke them, who spoke those words, was speaking specifically about political power, not the personal power that you and I are talking about. So combine that with the fact that we have witnessed countless abuses of power in our lives. How many abuses of power have we witnessed? Like all we got to do on any given day is, read the headlines or watch the news, and we're witnessing abuses of power, not only and beyond the political world, in our personal lives. How many abuses of power have we witnessed? Where you combine that with the misunderstanding about what power is, like what happens is, and the fact also that we have been conditioned to run away from the emotions. We've been conditioned to be afraid of our own emotions. We have turned the emotions into weakness. So we run away from them. We don't want to feel stuff that feels uncomfortable. When you put all that stuff together, what happens is we end up giving away our power. Like, a little conflict comes up, a little confrontation, a little difference of opinion. You want to do this, I want to do that. You see it this way, I see it that other way. And so we end up swallowing all that stuff. We end up saying yes when inside it's like, no, we don't want to do that. I don't want to go see that movie. I don't want to go to that restaurant. But in order to keep the peace, we swallow our stuff. And those are simple, minor arguments. And of course, there's the need to compromise in every relationship. Tonight we go for Indian, tomorrow we go for Chinese. So that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about when it becomes a pattern and when we override deeper feelings, when we override deep beliefs, when we put up with stuff that doesn't really work for us, that it's not okay with us out of fear that we're going to be alone, or out of fear of conflict. And that's not a good strategy because what happens with that stuff, it doesn't go away. We try to sweep it under the rug and it only festers and it turns into resentments. It turns into anger and turns into rage and turns into, and that's the stuff that gets in the way of relationships in the long run.
Yeah. This- So beautifully, you just said it. And what would you tell to someone who fears opening up again after being hurt in one love?
Yeah, it's understandable. We've all been there. Um, but it's like, think of the heart, the heart center, the heart chakra, um, as the shutter of a camera, the iris of the eye. It opens and closes to allow more or less light in, or in the case of the heart, more or less love. If we shut our heart to our ex who cheated on us, who betrayed us, who left us for somebody else, or if we shut our heart to mom who did this, or daddy who wasn't there, or the teacher, or the minister, or whoever it was, we're not shutting our heart just to them. We can't shut the heart selectively. If we shut it, we shut it. And that's not okay, right? Because it's not even about the other person. It's not about the ex. This is about my heart and my relationship to love, my relationship to life. So at some point, we've got to find a way to forgive, because the only way to be able to open that heart again and to trust again is we have to forgive, and we have to and forgive doesn't mean forget, right? Forgive doesn't mean that we place ourselves stupidly or with our eyes closed in the same situation with the same person again. No, it doesn't mean that. But it means that we have to find some way of forgiving, because if we're holding them over the fire for what they did or didn't do, our hand is also in that fire getting burnt. So forgiveness, we know, we've heard this in different ways, is for us. And to forgive intelligently, consciously, with wide eyes wide open. And that's how what we make ourselves. We give ourselves the gift of taking a chance on love again, because again, it isn't on others. This is about our relationship to love. And I don't wanna shut down my relationship to love because of what some human did or didn't do. That's not okay. I'm not gonna do that personally.
Yeah.
And and then Shreya, of course, is like, this is where the personal work comes in. Like, nobody forced us at gunpoint to get into that relationship, and so we've got to get, like, honest with ourselves. Why do I keep attracting that same kind of person? How many times did I override the red flags? Right, thinking, "Oh, I don't know if this is gonna work." Like, at some level, we knew, but we override those feelings. We override our intuition because we don't wanna be alone. We're afraid of being alone. And then, well, there we go. We got into another relationship that doesn't work out. But if we're willing to do that work, that deeper work of being with ourselves, of understanding ourselves, of seeing our patterns, of figuring out our triggers, it is so infinitely worthwhile.
Yes, yes, I definitely agree with you. And this is such a wonderful conversation with you. And thank you for sharing all your knowledge, your experience, and insights. And if my listeners want to connect with you, then what's the best way?
The best way, Shreya, is probably my website, which is soulfulpower.com. soulfulpower.com. If they want to connect with about the books or buy the books, you can get them on Amazon. And the two books are, the last one is Conscious Love, Transforming Our Relationship to Relationships. And the previous one that we talked about the power, is Awakening the Soul of Power.
Yes, yes. And I will make sure to attach all the details and links below so that the
Oh,
listeners
thank
can find them easily and get in touch with you and listen more from you because you are a wonderful person and the knowledge and experience you have and the style of your storytelling, it's really, really amazing. And thank you for this rich conversation and for holding a mirror to the kind of love we all crave, one rooted in
you.
truth, soul, and presence.
How beautifully said. What beautiful words. And thank you again for having me on the show and for the beautiful questions that you asked.
Thank you. And to all my listeners, conscious love begins not when we find the right partner, but when we become the right home for love within ourselves. Until next time, breathe deep, love wide, and keep coming home to me.